And action. Welcome to another incredible episode of the Action Podcast. And today we are on episode 83. And I apologize for this little light, guys. I don't know how to fix it. So bear with me.
What is that?
I don't know. I can't fix it. Yeah, maybe just the time of day we're shooting it. I don't know. But yeah, like I said, we got a pretty decent set of movies today. The number one movie we're going to be reviewing is the one that you can see behind me here, Leave the World Behind, which is on Netflix now. That is, of
Sneaky
course,
good.
yeah. Well, don't spoiler alert, Pete.
No, I'm just saying, like, we didn't hear anything about this movie, and then it just kind of came out, and it's like, oh my gosh, Julia Roberts is in it, and you watch it.
Yeah.
Go on, Paul.
Mahershala Ali is also in it, and Ethan Hawke.
Right.
Next, we have Poor Things, the much anticipated Oscar buzz movie from a Greek director that I cannot pronounce off the top of my head. And then that stars Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo. And
Yorgos Lanthimos.
there you go. And William Dafoe is also in this. Next, we have Eileen, and that stars Anne Hathaway. And then lastly, we'll be reviewing Dashing Through the Snow, which is on Netflix. That's a Christmas movie starring Lil Rel Howery and Chris Ludacris, and I forgot his last name. So with that, Pete, let's get into our main event here. Leave the World Behind.
Wow. Incredible. Are you asking me about it? Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah, we're live, Pete. We're live.
Okay. Hey, we're live. And we're live. No, this is, like I said in the intro, this is a movie that really just didn't have anything behind it. Like, I didn't know this movie was coming out, and I didn't really know what to expect. So I start watching it. It's Julia Roberts. It's Ethan Hawke. It's, how do you say his name? Something Ali?
Mahershala.
Mahershala Ali, who's amazing. So this movie split into parts, which I always kind of like in a way, if you do it right, like when you split it up.
Well, it's based off a book. That's why.
Okay. So basically, let me skip to the end because I remember texting Paul and saying, "Oh my gosh, wow, what a movie." I have issues with the ending, but I'm blown away by it. And he's like, "Well, if you continued with the ending and made it more robust, you would need a 4-hour movie." And I was like, in my head, I was thinking, I would have easily sat through 4 hours of this movie just because of how gripping it was throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was so filled with tension, that each moment, each time it went to a different scene, I was right there. It was really well done. What a great movie. Great performances too. I mean, Ethan Hawke just crushes every time. The great thing about this movie is that it's very apocalyptic in nature, but I won't give up
Yeah,
what
let's not do. We won't do spoiler alerts. People just
behind any of that.
it's streaming, and sometimes people are a little late to the game when it comes to streaming films. So we don't want to spoil anything on this one. Only the theater ones will spoil. But I'm with you. My comp for this film, Pete, would be I Am Legend or like World War Z, which is again like you're kind of saying apocalyptic to a sense, but then you're also trying to figure out kind of this world. And so you don't really.
There's not that action that a World War Z has, right? Like
No,
World War
this
Z
is more
so
tense.
action packed. This is such a nice flowing, just a story about two families that are forced to be together.
Oh, but see, you don't know what's happening throughout the film. So you're kind of going on this journey, and you're just getting little information bit by bit. You're kind of really in it along with Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke, really just trying to figure out like what's going on and what's happening, and it's really really interesting, really well, I thought, written, well,
beautifully written,
well directed. The cinematography was excellent, editing, sound design, like literally, this is a 5-tool film that really combines all the elements of filmmaking that makes a really really good picture. And
beautifully shot. The director, Sam Ishmael.
Yeah.
He hasn't done a lot of features, I don't think, but what he's famous for is Mr. Robot. And I know you haven't seen Mr. Robot, but but Mr. Robot is amazing. It's a beautiful series. It's thought-provoking. It's everything that you want in a series. And so knowing that he's behind the camera for this film tells me everything. This is a must see.
Yeah. I don't know where I'd place it in terms of the movies of the year. I'd have to really sit back and think about it. But I definitely think I feel like it's a top 10 movie of the year for sure.
And pointed out by our mother, executive produced by Barack and Michelle Obama, which was really bizarre to find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird.
And I think I kind of mentioned this to you off camera, but I'm glad this wasn't like this was just a pure like story. So, this is not a political film by any stretch of the imagination. So whether you're fans of them or not, it really they don't it's not again not a political film. So it's cool that they're just in the entertainment side of it and just making things like because again sometimes everybody has sometimes agendas when it comes to
Sure.
like if but they don't in this one, which is awesome. Again, it's just cool that they're making something like this. So
And they and a sneaky tiny performance by Kevin Bacon, who is in this movie for about 4 minutes of screen time,
yeah,
but he always has an impact and he always just comes in and just crushes every time. Just beautiful little tiny role.
yeah, he's just trying
Right.
to add to his degrees of Kevin Bacon with this film. So
It got a 6.7 on IMDb, and I might put it at a 7 if I had to, gun to the head, because I
I
think
put
it's
it an
that
8.
good.
I would put it over an 8 easily.
So good.
What I mean, why do you think a 7? Why not an 8?
I don't know if this is if one of the best movies of the year, but it happens to be just one of my favorite movies of the year. I was just so pleasantly surprised by this movie. Um, I'm gonna watch it several times because I
Yeah,
now I
I'll
want to
probably watch.
see
I
I
watched
want to
it
see all
twice.
the little tiny pieces that kind of lead up to
Yeah.
this ending, and it's so good. Go and see this movie, please. It's so
Yep.
good.
Yeah, absolutely. So that with that, we'll move on to our next film, which is Poor Things. I'll go ahead and start on this one, Pete. But like you mentioned, this
Please.
is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, and he is now nominated for a Golden Globe for this directing. But the synopsis of this movie is it's an incredible tale about the fantastical evolution of Bella Baxter, a young woman brought back to life by the brilliant and unorthodox scientist Dr. Godwin Baxter. Um, there might be more, but it's cut off. But this has an 8.5 on IMDb. This is also, I think the critical acclaim is super high as well. 87 Metascore. So
No.
this is the critics, darling type of a film. This is a very avant-garde type of a film. This is a very experimental type of a film. Um, you're tend to believe that this is kind of a 1800s-ish type of film, maybe early 1900s. Um, but also in this weird kind of like alternate universe, if that makes sense. But this is I'll tell you what, the creativity level on this film is pretty high. And I can kind of see why it is so critically acclaimed. I don't think all audiences are going to love this film. I think there are going to be a lot of people that are going to say, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And I get that. This is also, if you're a hyper Christian, this film is probably not for you or any other religion. It's a highly sexual film, a lot of
Which I
nudity.
did not anticipate at
I didn't
all.
know. Yeah, I didn't know either. I did because you really don't know the premise of it, right? And you're just kind of going, and you kind of told me the premise a little bit, so I'm like, okay. And then it's Frankenstein is obviously like a big influence in this film. The director even asked the screenwriter to study young Frankenstein. Um,
Yeah,
and
the premise just for our audience is a woman who's pregnant commits suicide, and this mad scientist doctor who's a genius and ahead of his time, played by Willem Dafoe, takes the brain out of the still alive infant and puts it into the dead body of the mom, who's Emma Stone. And we see her progression as an adult, but with her young mind that is growing, and it just goes from there. It's a discovery movie of a woman, and it's a discovery of, the what men are in terms of society and what that really means. She discovers who she is sexually. Um, and really, I don't really understand this movie at all. The positives of this movie are that Emma Stone is phenomenal. Like, she's everything that everyone's been talking about with her performance. I totally agree.
Yeah,
Um,
she might be the favorite for the Oscar.
she might be the favorite. I'd still give it to she's slipping my mind right now, but the girl from Maestro, I would still give it to her.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Carey Mulligan, Casey Mulligan.
yeah, Carey Mulligan. I would give it to her, but I mean, if they give it to Emma Stone, I mean, what are you gonna do?
I feel Emma Stone. This was an out there role, and obviously this is a very bold role.
Seemed
Um,
a role like where someone's like, if you want an Oscar, do this role.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I don't, I don't know if she would have done a role like this other than if I'm not guaranteed an Oscar, right? Like,
Yeah.
because
Well, she's at least getting nominated, right? Like she's gonna get nominated for it for sure. But I'll tell you what, I was pleasantly entertained, only because it was so bizarre and weird. Oh, I forgot to look up what my comparison of this film. So we did one of our first podcasts we did. I'm looking it up right now.
you look it up, and in the meantime, I'll talk about my
Well, I
my
didn't
other
finish.
positives.
Well, no, no, no. I'm finishing my positives. Um, but I
No,
was
no, I have positives.
I doubt it. You rarely have positives.
No, I
Um,
do have positives of the film. I don't like this film at all, but I have positives for it.
I thought this movie again. I thought it did a decent job of being entertaining. Sometimes these films can just be
Yes.
absolutely dreadful, but this one did a decent job of like, all right, like I was
You're
entertained
looking for the
because
Viggo
it was.
Mortensen movie.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
for.
that's dreadful. Dreadful.
Um, okay, here we go.
Here we go. Come on.
Crimes of the Future.
Crime. Oh, God, it was so bad.
This is way better than Crimes of the Future. But it's still out there like that,
But
you know?
there, yeah, there's some similarities in how like a filmmaker wants to just take things to an absolute extreme, right? And go ahead, keep going with yours because I got thoughts.
But yeah, I do think this movie does have a deeper layer to it. Again, I think it really kind of examines, the power or like how men try and control women, but then at the same time, the power that women have over men, and it really kind of dissects that dichotomy between that. And
Which was encapsulated in like one scene where she was ready to go again, and the guy's like, "Well, I can't really go again," and she's like, what an inherent flaw in being a man, like where you
yeah,
can't just have sex one more time again. I can have sex all the time."
yeah.
She immediately just goes off and does her thing, and it there's some real humor in this movie.
Yes, that was the other part. This movie was surprisingly funny. There's a lot of funny lines and funny moments where you
Real humor.
laugh out loud, actually.
Yeah.
And you know, a, a- an interesting project. Again, not going to be for everybody. I think we give a pretty good idea of what to expect if you went to see this film. But it's out there. This film is out there. So
But there's also, outside of the acting and the comedy, there's some really beautiful shots. And they are very imaginative. Like,
and the
it's
production
not
design.
like
I think the production
everything is
design was really good.
everything is through the lens of this girl, who is a woman who has an infant mind that is growing as we're watching her story progress. And so everything that she sees that we're seeing as an audience is probably through the lens of a child in a way. And they use fisheye lenses, which is really bizarre. And then they use like this um the peephole lens.
Yeah.
I don't what's
That,
it called?
yeah, I mean that works. There's no
Peephole lens.
they don't really
Uh,
teach that.
they do a lot of these like really weird sort of bizarre things throughout the movie, and it just works in a way. um I just think overall it's just like 30 minutes. Like, I remember like 30 minutes left in the movie, I'm like, I understand what you're trying to say. Like, can we just end the movie. I think it was about 30 minutes too long. I think they could
I
have
wouldn't
accomplished
I wouldn't
more.
argue against that. I wouldn't argue against that. There's definitely a point where I'm like, okay, I get it.
I get it,
Move
right?
on. Move on.
Like
Yeah.
let's just move forward. I understand what you're trying to say
Yeah.
on
I
every
agree with that.
level.
I agree with that. Could use some
It's
the
got-
last half could have been cut in half for sure.
So yeah,
Awesome. So again, take that for what it's worth, people. Um,
fun.
yeah,
Good luck.
if you want to go see it, great. If not, I totally understand. Um,
You want to see a great performance? Go and see it because Emma Stone's brilliant.
yeah. Next we have Eileen, and that again stars Anne Hathaway. Um, and this place takes place in like what, the 50s, right? Thomasin McKenzie is also starred. This got a 6.7 on IMDb. You gotta be kidding me. William
I
Old
agree with it.
William Oldroyd directed this. And Pete, I'll let you start on this one.
Yeah.
I've got some interesting things.
Yeah, I know that you weren't really a huge fan of this, and I actually I I don't know if I was a fan of the movie as much as I'm a fan of what it could be, right? Like I feel like this movie was almost like a prequel to something like X or Pearl, right? Where we there's this girl who's played by Thomasin McKenzie, who we've known from Jojo Rabbit. She was in Power of the Dog, and Hathaway, who is not the star of the movie by any stretch, but she comes in and she does a great job. I'm not an Anne Hathaway fan at all,
Yeah.
and I loved her in this movie. I thought she did an amazing job with it.
I
But
thought,
this movie is bizarre because it really just take you through this normal life of this girl who's just kind of shit on, to be honest, on on every level. And then things sort of turn, but they turn at the very, very end. Like you really got to get through the majority of this movie before things sort of turn sinister. But I feel like I'm excited about this movie because of what its prospects could be. I feel like this could be like the new Pearl or the new X. Like we can watch Eileen turn into this girl who just is insane and just kills people, right? Like it's just
yeah. I
I feel like there's some real potential with this property. I don't know if they'll ever do it, but it's beautifully shot. You really do feel like you're in the 70s or the 80s or whenever this movie is supposed to take place.
Oh,
Like you
it's like
really feel
it's like the 50s.
at the 50s, whatever, but you feel
Definitely.
like you're watching that time period, like the
No,
whole
for sure.
time.
I I think for me the issue with this film, and I'm gonna
Slow burn.
this might be my most disappointing movie of the year. I really like the
Mm,
trailer, and so I was actually like mildly looking forward to this.
mm.
I felt with this, I felt this movie was a little what struggled with style. And what I mean by that is it had different tones like all over the place. So I didn't know if I was watching a psychological thriller or if I'm watching kind of a, coming of age movie or I just didn't, I felt like it didn't go far enough in one direction. Like it just kept me in this weird murky land. And I felt like
Yeah,
I felt it should have been more of a thriller, but there wasn't enough thrilling events in it to where I'm just like, oh man, like this is amazing. Like I felt there was no real story to it.
right.
Um, I know what you're saying. Like th there's a couple like, whoa, what just happened there? And that was kind of cool.
But it
But
happened at the end.
right. But at the same time, it still was like it just seems scattered. Like I didn't know what the point of the movie was. I remember asking Nicole about 30 minutes in, I'm like, what is this movie about? Like, I don't
Right.
even know where this movie's trying to go or what the story is.
I
Like,
understand what you're saying because there's no payoff to knowing about the kid that she sort of watching over in the prison, right? In the boys' prison, like his story, you never really hear a lot about it, and there's no real relationship there. It just seemed like there was about an hour, literally an hour of this story, and then the end happens just out of the blue, and it has nothing to do with what we just watched, right?
yeah.
So I get you in terms of like this is a poorly made movie. However, I feel like there's some huge potential. And then if they did my idea of turning in this into like a Pearl or an X kind
Yeah.
of IP, this movie would be looked at differently.
Yeah. And by the way, just for the audience to understand, apparently I'm like on the different pages, all these. I'm looking at the reviews 95, 91, 90, 90, 90, 85. Um, Me and Richard Lawson from Vanity Fair seem to be on the same page. Um,
He's like, what the fuck?
yeah. Jordan Raup from the film stage. It sounds like we're even Benjamin Lee from The Guardian. Oldroyd never seems entirely sure just how pulpy and weird his material is, unable to decide how far to push, the odd stylistic flourish and burst of lurid music, ultimately feeling incongruous in a movie otherwise visually quiet. I mean, I'm that's kind of how I felt. I mean, that kind of sums up what I'm trying to say. I just
It's
it,
almost as if the tactic of the filmmaker was to lull you to sleep before they slam you in the face with a sledgehammer. Like,
yeah, I mean, sure.
but
I mean, that's what you want to do.
you have to do that properly. Like
It's just not,
there still needs to be a story
yeah,
that is all connected. You can't just walk somebody through the park one day and then slam them in the face and go, "That's my movie."
yeah. I just didn't find it entertaining. Like
Right.
that's my always thing. Like we just talked about Poor Things, right? Poor Things
I'd
is a
give
movie
it
that's way out
75
there,
maybe for this.
but I'm entertained at least by
Yeah.
Poor Things. I'm like, I'm oddly entertained. I don't know where this movie's going in terms of Poor Things. I mean, I kind of knew where it was going, but it was still interesting, even though how it was super weird.
Even
This movie, I just never, I just didn't know what I'm watching.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, so Shea Wiggum is the father. You know him from Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah,
I think he was in Dead Reckoning, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning as well.
he was in
But
City of Lies too. He's a Frank White.
yeah, he's amazing. And
Yeah,
he was good in this role. And so
I thought the
it's
acting was excellent in this film.
it's really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of
They
pluses
do
to the
have
film.
little pieces that you pick up that kind of lend to the ending itself, but I think they could have done it in just such a better way that would have made it more of an interesting story. I feel like the prospects are better than the result of this film.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, like if someone pitched me this idea, I felt like, okay, yeah, that sounds interesting. Okay. Uh and but I would have worked on the first act because I think the first act
Yeah.
is
Yeah, the it was so drawn out and but she's great. I mean, Thomasin McKenzie was she was really good in this role.
yeah.
Um, just like with Poor Things, like she's a girl that is trying to discover her sexuality and doesn't know what to do with it. And Anne Hathaway comes along and she's all of a sudden she's in love with her. And it's just like you could have done that in about 10-15 minutes,
Yeah.
not an hour.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right.
It's interesting. Whatever.
Yeah. So take it for what it's worth. I think it's one thumbs up, one thumbs down.
Good
Uh,
shit.
I'm definitely not this might be my least favorite movie of all year. I'm gonna say that. So take that for what it's worth, even though it's got so high grades.
Your awful movies.
Well, you know me, dude. I try not to trash a movie. I always try and find the positives, but I was so mad at
Sure.
the end. I'm just like, where, like, there's no, yeah. Anyways, I can go on and forever.
You bash it
Next,
all.
next we have Dashing Through the Snow. You can find this on Hulu/Disney. Actually, it's technically Disney because this is actually a Disney Christmas
Right.
film. That's actually what intrigued me when I watched this. This is directed by Tim Story, and you may know that name. He just directed The Blackening, Tom and Jerry, Shaft. What else did he do? Kevin Hart, Ride Along 2,
Right.
Think Like a Man, his Kevin Hart specials. So this guy, I'm like, okay, this is not a small movie. This is not some throwaway movie. Lil Rel Howery, he's been in tons of
Stars my dude, Lil Rel.
Ludacris is
He's so
also in
good.
this. But I've only seen half this, so I'll chime in at the end, Pete. But if you go ahead and you can give your review on this one.
Right. I mean, Lil Rel, I mean, we just saw him on Hulu recently. He was in that what was that movie called? Where he
The
was
the Mine, the
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 one where he's trapped in that place.
Cell, not the Cell.
Something like that. But he was so good in that. He's good in everything, and
The
he's
Rig.
good in
The
this.
Rig. It was a
No, it
mighty.
wasn't the rig. It wasn't the rig. Um, but yeah, he plays Santa. Ludacris is this social worker who is, I don't know if he's divorced or if they're separated or whatever.
They're going through a divorce.
Going through yeah, going through the
I think they're
process or whatever.
separated.
Um, and so the daughter gets dropped off at Ludacris's house, and they have this Santa Claus guy, and they don't believe that he's actually Santa Claus. He's probably just some crazy guy. As a social worker, his job is to
And Ludacris hates Christmas because his family got like ruined.
robbed by
Yeah.
a Santa from the mall or whatever. And so, yeah. Um, this is a cute family movie. There were some funny moments. It's nothing spectacular at all. Got a 5.5 on IMDb, which tells you sort of what I'm saying right now. It's a really good family watch. If you guys need some Christmas movies, and I don't know how you could ever be tired of a Christmas story, but if you are and you want to see something different,
Yeah.
this certainly is right up there with some fun times. There's a really brilliant thing that I will say. When they do the reindeer flying and they show it for the first time, they do something so brilliant. They made it like there's a street that the reindeer are going on. So it's not like they're like flying and doing their legs like this, which I never understood. A street was sort of projected and they're running on that sort of magical street or whatever. And it looked beautiful. And I remember it stood out to me as something that was really kind of great about this film. It's cute. It's fun. He's funny. Ludacris is fine. He's Ludacris. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's cute.
Yeah. That, like I said, that's kind of what my review would be. It's nothing crazy. On the IMDb rankings, it's pretty much the same as Family Switch or Candy Cane Lane. I probably like Family Switch the most out of all these three. But yeah, if you like those films, like you'll probably like this film. Mark Mead will probably hate this film if he has to watch it, but
Marketing for sure.
but yeah, I think you need to like this genre if you're gonna be mildly entertained by this film. But if you don't like these kind of, I wouldn't go. They're not quite or they're better than Hallmark level, but they're
Oh,
definitely
for sure. There's
streaming.
Hallmark, then there's this, and then there's, The Godfather, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. On tap for next week. We have a big week next week. The number one film, of course, is Wonka, much anticipated film starring Timothy Chalamet. Did I say that right?
Shyamalan.
Yeah. And Hugh Grant is the Oompa Loompa. Also is Iron Claw starring Zac Efron. And then we're also going to be trying to see Fast Charlie, which stars Pierce Brosnan, and Illumination animation film Migration, which will also be
Got to
coming.
check that out as well.
Yeah.
There's a few other smaller movies that if I can get to them, we'll do it. If not,
We'll announce it if we end up doing them. So,
exactly.
yeah, and then we just so everyone is aware, we got two new shows also that we just released. We have movie news, which we break down all the news of the week, movie announcements, things of that nature. There's tons of news constantly, so we want to help you keep informed with that. And then also we have Paul's Old Time Movie Club.
The book club. Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of like a book club of movies. We watch old movies that are on streaming, so that we can again kind of broaden our horizons there. And the first one was The Great Wallow Pepper, which starred Robert Redford. The next one's going to be Marathon Man. So make sure you check those out. Yeah. So check those out. And yeah, with that, Pete, that is a cut. Thanks, guys.